All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're talking about a massive, fundamental shift in the history of Southern Africa. This was a moment that literally redefined everything: how people lived, how they worked, and how they saw their place in the world.
It's a huge question, isn't it? But for this story, the change didn't come from some epic battle or a king's grand decree. No, it started with something much, much smaller.
That's right, a single seed. The incredible discovery that you could actually plant something in the ground, care for it, and watch it become food. This one tiny idea was the spark that would unravel an entire way of life and build a completely new one in its place.
And we're not just talking about what's for dinner here. This was about moving from a life of constant wandering to putting down roots. It was a truly revolutionary shift in every sense of the word. So let's set the scene a little. For thousands of years, Southern Africa was the home of nomadic Khoisan groups. But then, about 2,000 years ago, a new people began to arrive from the north. These were African farmers, and they brought with them a totally different set of skills and a whole new vision for what society could be. So let's just break down how different these two worlds were. On one hand, you have the nomadic life, where your entire existence is dictated by the seasons and following the herds. You're always on the move. On the other hand, you have farming life. You find good land, you stay put, you grow crops like sorghum and watermelon, and you raise your own animals. This wasn't just a change of scenery, it was a fundamental change in the rhythm of life itself.
So, you've decided to stop wandering and settle down. Now what? Well, you have to build permanent structures, not just for you and your family, but for your whole society. So how did they go about building this new world?
What's really fascinating is the logic of the village layout. Right at the very heart of it all was the kraal, basically a high-security pen for the community's absolute most precious resource, their cattle. Then, arranged in a circle around the kraal, were the huts, organized by social standing, with the chief getting the biggest one, of course. And finally, wrapping the whole thing up was a huge fence made of thorny branches. This was a clear message to predators and people alike. We are here, and we are here to stay.
And the homes themselves? They literally grew from the world around them. They had thatched roofs, and the walls were this ingenious plaster made from a mix of mud and cattle dung. Super practical, totally sustainable, and perfectly designed for the environment. Now, we mentioned cattle were valuable, but it's almost impossible to overstate just how important they were. They weren't just animals, they were money, they were status, they were the absolute bedrock of the entire social and economic system. It all boiled down to this one simple, powerful idea. Your wealth, your status, your power in the community, it was all measured by how many cattle you had. This created a brand new social ladder that just hadn't existed in the same way before. And who's at the very top of that ladder? The chief, or stamhoof. He was, by definition, the wealthiest man around because he had the most cows. And that wealth wasn't just for show. It translated directly into political muscle. He's the one who decided who got what land, he controlled the grain stores, and he collected taxes, which, you guessed it, were paid in grain and more animals. And check this out, the whole community worked like a well-oiled machine. Everybody had a specific role. The men took care of things like smelting iron and building. The women were really the backbone of the community, handling the farming, pottery, and running the household. Boys had the crucial job of looking after the livestock, and girls learned all the domestic skills they'd need. Everyone had a part to play, and every single part was essential. But this complex society wasn't just running on social rules. It was powered by a huge technological leap forward. I mean, there's a reason we call this the Iron Age, right? This one innovation gave these farmers a massive advantage. Think about it. The jump from stone tools to iron tools was an absolute game changer. All of a sudden, you could make tools that were way stronger, way more durable, and just way more efficient. This completely revolutionized what was possible in farming, in building, and even in defending your village. So how'd they do it? Well, it was a real community project. The women and children would go out and dig up the rocks that were rich in iron ore. Then the men would take over, smelting it in a super hot furnace to get the metal out. And finally, a skilled blacksmith would take that glowing hot iron and hammer it into the essential tools that built this new world, things like hoes, axes, and plows. Now, alongside iron, pottery was another absolutely crucial skill, one that was mastered mostly by women. These clay pots were the workhorses of everyday life, used for cooking, for storing grain, for carrying water. But some pottery went way beyond the practical, like the incredible Leidenberg heads. These were these intricate, mysterious sculptures that we think were used in major ceremonies, maybe as a way to connect the living with the world of their ancestors.
Of course, these farmers didn't just show up to an empty continent. The Khoisan people had been living there for thousands and thousands of years. So what happened when these two completely different cultures came face to face?
It's the classic question, right? And sure, there was definitely some competition over things like land and water. But the real story, the one the archaeological evidence tells us, is so much more complex and fascinating than just conflict. When you look at the evidence, it really paints a picture of cooperation. You see the farmers' iron tools showing up at Khoisan sites, which points to trade. You hear the famous click sounds of Khoisan languages get woven into the farmers' Bantu languages, a huge family of languages spoken all over Africa. You even find Khoisan art in the farmer settlements. On top of that, the groups intermarried and worked together. It's a picture of two cultures living side by side, trading, influencing each other, and creating something new together.
And that leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. When you look at that ancient blueprint, a society built on farming, a social ladder where wealth defines your status, a community where everyone has a specialized job, isn't it kind of wild how many of those foundational ideas still echo in our world today? It really makes you stop and think, what blueprints are we building for the future?